Hi, my name is Anne Graham Walker. I live in Nanoose Bay on Vancouver Island, and I'm the featured poet on May 19th at the ZoomMuse Poems for Peace. And I'd really like you to join me. It's going to be at 11 a.m. Pacific time and 2 p.m. Eastern time. And you'll be able to find the link. I think it's probably right here, right near my face somewhere. And I look forward to reading my poems and sharing them with you. I've always written poems on, in my journals and scribbled them in the margins. I've really been a writer all my life, but not in poetry. I've been a journalist. I've written for radio. I've written speeches. And it really, and before that, when I was younger, I started out actually as a folk singer. I was a folk singer when I was in my early 20s. So it's always been kind of exploring words in different ways. And it really wasn't until I retired and came to Vancouver Island in 2002 that I decided I really wanted to focus on poetry. Right now, I'm moved to write about the Ukraine war. I'm going to read you one of those poems. And the first one I wrote early during the war, like right at the beginning. And this poem's called Notes on Ukraine First Days. You'll probably remember some of the little images from it. So it's called Notes on Ukraine First Days. In flames, the invaded sky wails, rains blood. Old people find shelter in unheated subways, surrender their frailty to hard concrete floors. Trapped in their childhood, a memory of genocide, somebody close. How quietly they line up woolly blankets, set down Ziploc bags of heart meds as they wait for the sirens, for the shelling to end. Outside, a billowing mushroom cloud, resplendent orange, flares full the black night, swallows up the oxygen. By dawn, a resolute young woman is out on the street alone, bundled in scarves and mitts. She's sweeping the broken glass in what's left of her square, her body unprotected. Behind her, a bombed out block of apartments, eerily quiet, black smoldering cars. We will fight back and we will win, she says, smiling fiercely into the TV cameraman's lens. Meanwhile, guarding Ukraine, many stout elder women are not making soup. They have Googled complete instructions for assembling Molotov cocktails kept hidden in straw bales out by the cow. If their village is occupied, they will conceal them in shopping bags under shawls. Invaders, beware. Every farmer's wife is a potential assassin. I am Russia's target number one, says Zelensky. My family is target two. He will not leave for safe ground. Nor will the Ukrainian woman in a white pom-pom cap and black jacket caught on video in the Kherson region, the woman who walked up to two well-armed Russian soldiers and handed them sunflower seeds for their graves, saying, "Put these in your pockets so the flowers will grow when you die here. And by the way, what the fuck are you doing on our land with all these guns?" You can cut out the bad word if you want to. This poem was inspired by a news report. It was amazing. The reporter spoke to the people. Well, afternoon at the Brovary Central Hospital, March 26, 2022. Dmitry Mulyar, the beekeeper. Dmitry Mulyar, the beekeeper, 44 with 3 children, tending his bees outside his home in East Kyiv when the Russian shell hit. His brother Andriy beside him. I brought Dmitry straight to the hospital, but he died along the way. These so-called liberators, they are not people, they're not even animals. Andrili Mulyar, a coffee roaster. Now he must help Dimitri's family decide whether to stay with the bees or move to a safer place. Yaroslav Zraitel, the hospital surgeon, sent his wife and kids to a town in the west. Now he stays at the hospital, sleeping and eating between constant surgeries. In the first week, we'd hide. For hours, we'd hide when we heard the blasts. Now we just wait to hear the siren. And if there are no explosions, we continue with our work. Zina Kilko, the midwife, brought her husband to Brovary Central, his leg blasted off by a drunk Russian soldier. The leg had to be amputated. She said the Russian soldiers had taken over their house, kept them captive 2 days, stole their money, stole their clothes, their laptop with Zina's pictures of the grandkids. There was disagreement amongst the soldiers. Three of them eventually took pity on us and let us seek medical attention. Igor Rubstov, homeless for a decade, feeding stray cats and dogs on the street where he lives when he was hit in the legs by Russian shells. I was falling. It was hard. I felt dizzy, but I had to get to the ambulance somehow. I did not want to die. Igor's bare legs have been bandaged. He has a bed, a roof over his head, as long as the Russians don't target the hospital, how they might have by now. I think the reason that poetry is about peace is that I think that through poetry we come to a place of profound empathy and compassion. And really for me, that like nothing else. And also, like I mentioned, a place of profound courage too. And so that's the work of poetry and the poet. And to me, that's peacemaking. I'm a Quaker, and that's partly how I do my work as a Quaker, is through my poetry. I'd had some teachers who had really helped me to understand how important craft is to me. I didn't want to just write and scribble anymore like I had. I wanted to really learn how to write the best poems I could write. And so I was really lucky in BC to begin working with some wonderful teachers. I worked for really like maybe 13 years with the poet Patrick Lane at retreats, maybe twice a year. He's just an amazing teacher, and I learned so much from him. Canadian master poet who died, I think about 3 years ago now. I also worked with Betsy Warland, who helped me with the manuscript of my chapbook. And she just taught me a lot about courage in writing, which is, I think, really important in poetry. Now I'm going to read to you. I like to write poems when I'm traveling. When I go places, when I go on road trips or on boats or on trains, I get really inspired. Sort of stories come to me, and I love to write stories in poems, and I love writing on trains. And this been writing on trains all my life, and so this is a train poem I wrote on a trip I took to Santa Fe. So it's called Sleeper Train on Amtrak. The belly of this train flies rails, drums railroad graves, breaks light, bends sheaves of sedge. It wails through towns and stops in some. Mike, the porter, sways down the jolting corridor, a tray of iced drinks balanced on one arm. He has the scarred head of a fighter. In my sleeper car, the past awakes. Place tumbles into view. Ghostly crews, the displaced men who laid these ties, pounded iron spikes in day's fire. Less than $1 a day for those who weren't white. They are still here in the spill of the hum, But so is the girl in black patent shoes who trailed her mother to the dining car, carrying her own miniature purse. Inside, a handkerchief, shiny packet of gum. I crossed this land by rail from west to east and east to west 6 times, spelling out words on the boxcars. Union Pacific, Southern Pacific, the Burlington. Riding backwards in an Amtrak roulette, I watch whole deserts fall behind. Rose glow rock outcrops drop, weightless, loose knitted. A white horse runs. How would it be to step inside one single fleeing archway, its frame a brief portal for the liver and white, black and white pelt smudges of miscellaneous cattle, roaming, combing the desert floor with soft lips. The feeling of being pulled out of time. Mike calls gallop, not as in hooves, a line of stores, trucks, beer and Navajo jewelry, hurrying people leashed to belongings, the things we choose as essential when leaving. Out my window, the hard-capped conductor steps off the train with a kid, blue-checked shirt, back of head, hands him over to 2 wrinkled cops. Then he calls, all aboard, how he does, a rooster crow, like his father, like his grandfather, as the last of that boy disappears into troubles. Is it the train then, or does the town slide away? Why do I do it? I don't know. I've just, like I said, I've been writing all my life. I write very much in the moment. I'm not an academic poet, although I do have an MFA. My MFA is about the novel I wrote. My poems just come to me. They come from inspiration. I love to write when I'm traveling. I have to have a line or two that kind of have the energy and the kind of luminosity to persuade me that it's going to be a poem that are going to give me the energy and the inspiration to keep going into the poem more deeply.
And these opening lines, do they just come to you as you're working about, so working in the garden or something?
Yeah. I mean, I think this one, it was those lines that where I somehow started to feel the movement of the train. The belly of this train flies rails, drums railroad graves, breaks light, bends sheaves of sedge. That just started to come. I started to feel it in my body. But I was also so moved, and by the there's just a lot happening for me in that poem, and I was just so moved by, and even on the trip, and that's why I really wanted to write the poem. Of course, the thing with the boy really happened, and I wanted to write about that. But I was so moved by the Chinese people who built those rails, and and then they were driven out of the country and treated so badly. And I actually went to the train museum in Sacramento and learned more about it, which was even more horrible. Yeah. So they definitely, I obviously entered my poem and were there. I also feel a deep sense of the conscious universe, and I'm sort of searching for ways to write about, well, I guess you would call them elegies for the environment. And I really only written 1 poem so far, maybe 2. So I haven't really found my language for witnessing that yet, but I do think it's important. I write a lot about grief and loss. I write a lot about family. My family was very broken and scattered. I've lived all over the world, and I sort of reconstructed my family through poetry. And I think that was something that was a big need, and that's what was my chapbook was about. You know, I didn't have like relatives that were part of my life. I sort of had to imagine my family and my extended family. I sort of had to write a book and put them all inside it to sort of bring my family together and explore them. I lived in South America till I was 9, spoke Spanish before English. And then I lived in Australia till I was 18. And then, you know, eventually I went to the United States and got educated there and stuff, and then came to Canada from there. So my parents were from Nebraska, and we would visit the States every, you know, 2 or 3 years. The company would send us, and so I guess the sort of a reference point I had in the United States was Nebraska, where my grandparents were, and also my father, who lived all over the world, you know, still had this affection for his hometown in Nebraska. So when he got old, I would take him there to visit his hometown. And this is a story I think may have been the last time I took him there. So it's a story. It's called Crossing Over. My father and I cross into Nebraska at the Rouleau Bridge, steel cat's cradle, portal to his boyhood. We've come by plane and rented Impala to say goodbye to his town, a final 9 miles from this beacon. The bridge deck rumble drum rolls his arrival. Missouri River sweeps out below, its brown glint flicking in the play of angled trusses. What does it feel like to be 87? Dad steers down the ramp that straddles the mucky banks. Nothing down there but trailers and a fishing club. His own remembered dive, washed away in high water. I've seen these riverbanks up close. The long-beaked sandpipers that pass through in spring. Strong-legged riparian spiders, a sheer river selvage, carved and recarved by fast currents. Dangerous, and yet more accessible than the high bluffs upstream. Lewis and Clark crossed near here. In my father's boyhood, there was a ferry and a ferryman here. Dad and his chums learned to drink here. Rouleau and riverbanks and prohibition booze. The first generation of teenagers with cars. Dad and his Model A, headlights switched off. Nicknames called car to car. Brother Al, Lousy Lion, Boosie Boos. Flapper girls whose fathers thought they were asleep. The bird note of brother's saxophone, yowling like a cat. There are many variations to this story. A judge would say that makes them less true, but I am not a judge. Dad insisted on driving this last stretch, said I could drive it with my eyes closed. He pulls onto the grassy shoulder, reads aloud the sign. He's back on Nebraska soil. His bony fingers outlined on the steering wheel. We're in a rented Impala on the Nebraska side of Dad's bridge, the windscreen and the car hood yellow splatted with bugs. Bright sun, May Day, 1997.
All right.
Maybe I'll read one last poem, because another thing happened, which was that I also lost some people this year. And I do write about grief. I think when I write about grief, I'm writing for a lot of other people, not just myself. Yeah. Here it is. Yeah, I lost my best friend. It's about the same time that my husband was diagnosed. I had been, because I'm a hospice worker, and my friend, though, she was in Cape Breton, and I couldn't be with her because it was COVID. But I was with her very closely and on the phone and by text and stuff. And yeah, but just near the end of her life was when my husband got diagnosed. But I wrote this poem for my friend about 2 weeks before she died. And it's called, she kept telling me about the thrush that she saw in her garden. So it's called Call of the Thrush. And there's a little excerpt at the beginning because I was inspired by a poem that Paul gave us by Joanne Kruger. It was an elegy that she wrote for a friend. And it says, say goodnight to the small field of daffodils, white doves and sparrows pass overhead. So Call of the Thrush. Say goodnight to the thrush calling your name. He will wait till you are ready, filling your skinny bones with a song remembered from your Irish childhood. This old house knows your stories and how many other families, how you counted the wooden stairs as you made your way to your bedroom this evening, remembering the weight of each baby in your arms as you carried them to bed those years. Now you listen for your son's tall footsteps as he comes, bringing you comfort and fluids. In your garden, hellebores, daffodils, soon peonies will be blooming. Last week, in a patch of sun, you directed as your grown children did the weeding, the mulching, your body now a hummingbird. On the phone, you told me you want the plants to look beautiful for your service. These days, I watch you slip into that puzzling threshold, steeped in death, and yet here, a lucid 80-pound traveler on the brink of invisible. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I really am grateful that you were here and listening to my poems, and I look forward to you joining me on May 19th for an hour featured reading at 11 o'clock Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time for the Poems per Piece ZoomMuse.